friends. Welcome to episode 300 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Instagram and Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. It is now my pleasure to introduce Learnics, which is our newest podcast sponsor. If you are overwhelmed with managing student research projects and wish that there were a better way to guide students towards credible sources and ethical research practices, then you need to try Learnics. Learnics automatically documents your students' research journeys, capturing their searches, website visits, and notes. Learnics then organizes the students' notes, creates perfectly formatted bibliographies, and even generates a snapshot report that reveals key insights into how the student conducts research. With Learnics, you can provide personalized feedback, identify research challenges, and teach information literacy skills more effectively. Visit Learnics.com to learn more and to schedule a demo. If you mention that you heard about Learnics on School Librarians United, you will receive 20% off your subscription. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 7. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for an update for listeners who tuned in last week when I was stranded at the Pittsburgh airport at 1 a.m. while trying to get home after attending the SLJ Summit in Raleigh. My direct flight to Detroit took a necessary detour due to an electrical mishap resulting in smoke coming from the cockpit. The plane intended to take us on to Detroit never appeared, and many passengers decided at 1 a.m. to rent cars and to just drive to their final destinations. I edited last week's episode into the wee small hours of the night while camped out at the children's playscape. I am very grateful for the cozy travel clothes that I chose to wear that day and for a scarf which doubled as my blanket. I drove directly from the airport to school, resulting in the world's weirdest and longest day in recent memory. That being said, the SLJ Summit ranks second only to AASL's National Conference as a favorite and one I'll make sure to attend in the future. And now for today's episode, Manga Goes to School, and my conversation with authors Ashley Hawkins, Emily Ratica, Sara Smith, Julie Stivers, and Mouna Toure. So excited. We are in for a treat today. We have 5 authors joining us to talk about the book that they have just released in celebration of episode 300, Manga Goes to School. Let's kick it off, first of all, with Sara Smith. Sara, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, thanks, Amy.
Friends,
so glad to be here.
Sara has a special spot in my heart. Thank you so much for making sure that 2024 ends with a really special episode. We've got your co-authors for this amazing book that you wrote. Sara, you have the rare distinction of returning to the podcast every 100 episodes. So listeners may remember you from episode 100, episode 200, and now today, episode 300. More than anything, Sara, I'd like to thank you for this vote of confidence. This podcast is a celebration of school librarians, and it is still going strong because of devoted library leaders like yourself.
Well, I am super excited to be here for your 300th. This is fantastic. I can't believe you got to this milestone. It's amazing. But also, I am excited to have this platform to share with my fellow co-authors and bring more manga content to school librarians.
Absolutely.
So thank you
So
for
we're
that
going to kick
opportunity.
things off, friends, and we are going to go. We've got 5 authors to join us. We are going to go as they are listed on the cover of their book in alphabetical order. So I'm going to ask them to each to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the library they support, maybe the grades, and, something a little bit about the programs. And let's go ahead, Ashley Hawkins.
Hi, so I'm Ashley Hawkins. I am located in Brooklyn. I am the school librarian at a 3K through 5 elementary school. I'm also a Queens College GSLAS adjunct. I teach reading motivation techniques in children and adolescents and information literacy instruction for K through 12. I'm also a book list reviewer, and I run a site called Manga Librarian.
Excellent. And friends, we're going to be putting links in the show notes, and you can hear Ashley Hawkins the first time you appeared on the show, episode 141, Manga Librarian. And I had great memories of that episode. We were deep in pandemic, and your cats were sort of entertaining in the background. And I know, and I'm going to say this right now, and this applies also to other guests on the show, the resources that I have gleaned from these experts have helped me develop my own collection in my library. And so you're going to want to make sure to go back and listen to these episodes, look at these show notes, because it is a ready reference for anybody who wants to do better when it comes to supporting their students. Fantastic. Let's go ahead. Emily Ratica. This is a first for me. You and I are just meeting. I appreciate all that you put into this amazing book, but we're meeting for the first time. Would you give us an idea? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've been in education. This is my 17th year. I was an English teacher for many years before I got my master's in library and information science and my certificate so I could go into the library. So I was in the library for 7.5 years as a teacher librarian at a public high school in Southern California. And because of circumstances and how California is, I am now back in the classroom teaching English again. And I'm in Southern California, but my heart still very much belongs to the library, and I miss it a lot. So I'm glad that I get to still can. While my school does not have a librarian, because of how Southern California is, or how California is, I'm just glad that I get to still, be a part of ASL
Well,
and ALA.
Emily,
and
forgive me.
libraries.
It seems to me obvious, but as a school librarian who's in the classroom, your students benefit from all of that expertise that you bring to the show every day. You are a librarian who's also a teacher in the classroom, and your students are just going to be incredibly lucky for that kind of perspective and that wealth of information that you bring every day.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And having been a teacher and then gone to the library and then come back to teaching, it's definitely given me a new perspective on teaching and how to incorporate literacy into like my everyday classroom work. And it's funny because other teachers will come to my classroom and they just see the amount of books I have and the reading that we do. And they're just like, wow, I wish I could do this. And I'm like, well, you can too. It's not that hard. But
I hope very hard that at some point your school realizes that the best place to put you is in a place where you can impact your entire school building with your expertise. Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing.
I hope so too.
All right, Sara Smith, hello. All right, this is episode 300. Thank you for revisiting the podcast every now and then. It has meant a lot to me. For anyone who has not listened to you, first of all, your links are in the show notes, but give us a little rundown of where you are now, because it is absolutely key. The last time we spoke, we talked about your job change.
Yeah. So, like Emily, I'm in my 17th year in education, and I am in year 2 of being a district library coordinator, also in California. So, I oversee 20 different schools, K through 12. We have 2 high schools, and a junior high, and a bunch of elementary schools, K-8s, a couple of continuations in there. So, I oversee a lot of different collections, a lot of library staff, but I'm the only certificated um, librarian in my district, so it's all classified paraprofessionals, hardworking folks doing the best that they can do out there, but it's a lot of work. Just doing a lot of library stuff every day. We're librarying all the time, as Courtly Pentland says.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. All right, let's go ahead and Julie Stivers, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Happy to know that some of the students are in this book, which is super exciting. Yes, so you will recognize their names. Who co-wrote a chapter on anime clubs building community. Now I am at Carolina Friends School, which was the first or one of the first racially integrated schools in North Carolina. And I am the upper school librarian there, but I still library middle school students a lot. We were.
I just saw you
Lucky
last
me, I get
week.
to see you twice in a week.
We were at SLJ. Dude, the presentation you gave was amazing. You had a non-compete presentation where everybody in the room got to see you on stage, and I just absolutely drank in your presentation. Would you just, for listeners, let us know what you spoke on? Because
Sure,
it really
of course.
did
And I love how you
make a
said
huge impact
that I had a
on me when
non-compete
I was sitting
instead
in
of
the
like
audience.
everyone was just forced to listen to us. I was with one of my favorite collaborators, Julia Torres, who is right now a public librarian in Denver. And we were talking about one of our favorite topics, which is building healing reading spaces, school spaces, to push back against the reading trauma that our students have encountered in their school lives.
Absolutely. I was taking down fastidious notes, and this is all in a quest to be better and do better when we know better. So I'm very glad I didn't have to like decide who I was going to watch.
It
They
was
just said,
it
nope,
was
this
strange
is so
though, just
important. We're just
coming
going
right
to
up,
showcase you
like not getting a
right
few
there on
minutes
center
to like
stage.
prepare your room and waiting for people to come in. It was like, okay, you're on. That was bizarre. But manga is a huge part of building a healing library and building a healing reading space.
I absolutely agree. And let's go ahead and Mona, welcome to the show. You and I also, I've never met, but I appreciate the book that you put together.
I thought we met at ALA.
Oh, wait a second. That's
Briefly,
right. That was
briefly,
a
but I think we met at ALA. I'm like 90% sure.
Yeah. Well, and forgive me. I was sort of in my just big smiles plastered on and meeting everybody, and I
Understandable.
apologize. But Muna, the book that you wrote, I love that this collaboration that you've put together, and I'm excited to hear more about how your expertise really played a pivotal role in creating this book. But tell me, Muna, for those of us who are just meeting you for the very first time, what is your day job?
So I'm a public librarian. So I'm a bit of the odd one out here. I don't work in a school. I'm a public librarian specializing in youth services and comics in Newport News, Virginia. I graduated from my library science degree from Old Dominion University in 2023. And I've been working as a full-time librarian since spring of this year.
Well, and forgive me, as I understand it, you're also an artist, and you have a publishing platform. Go into a little bit of detail. I'm so curious because as a random stranger stalking you on the internet, I can only learn so much. That is how I figure out who we are, but please give us a little more background because I understand that you come with many skills.
Oh, thank you. So outside of librarianship, I make zines, I make comics and art of many kinds. I've been drawing ever since I was a kid, but I've been in the indie comics and zine space since about 2013 when I went to the Small Press Expo in fall 2013. My life has changed since then. I've been in a few comics anthologies as a contributor. And in 2020, when most everyone was indoors, I decided to run my own art anthology. Yeah, so
I'm so glad. I'm hoping there'll be links in the show notes and people can start to get a better appreciation for the breadth of your artistry. So friends, this is such a talented team. You could have just as well have each authored your own book on this topic. And so I'm hoping you'll let us know how it is this project came together. Friends, this book called Manga Goes to School, I was lucky to see most of you present at ALA. That's right. And unfortunately, it was Ashley who was not at ALA, correct? That's right. So we were all in San Diego. I came to your session. Friends, I've included the link in the show notes. And that's where I got to meet Mouna. But again, you all could have written your own book, but you decided to collaborate. So let's get into this. What is it that really created this project, and pulled it all together?
So, hi, I'm Ashley speaking. I can kind of speak to that. I think, any of us could have done this solo. I personally strongly believe in collective work, and I think that's actually one of the strengths of school librarians is our capabilities as a collective and that we consistently uplift each other. And this book is stronger because it has wide perspectives based on a plethora of experience and expertise. I come from a pretty academic background, and I've been in the anime and manga fandom for a really long time as an otaku, which for non-otaku is just the word for super fan. And I've traveled to Japan multiple times, and that actually has in it like this inherent bias and perspective as a librarian. Like, I think what everybody else brings to it is different ways to come to this work. So we all come to manga as part of our library praxis from very different places. And I think that's why it was really important for this to be a collaborative work.
Yeah, I think we kind of all found each other.
This is Sara.
Yeah, this is Sara. So we all found each other on social media and started following each other, and then started presenting together. And just, I appreciated, like Ashley said, the different perspectives that we all brought. And I think our strength in presentations then became like, hey, we should write a book. So it kind of became the next progression. Julie mentioned that we should write a book because she had written a book before, and it just became like, we had so much to give, and the presentations only can reach so many people that go to the conferences, right? So, how do you get the information out to a wider audience that can't go to ALA or AASL? And the book just seemed like the next natural step of people need this information. Librarians need this information. So we need to spread the wealth a little bit more.
So this is Emily. Just to kind of go off what Sara said, I think too, a lot of us were just saying the same thing kind of over and over again in our presentations. that we all got so many of the same kinds of questions that we'd go to each other's presentations or, see each other's posts on social media. And it was like, hey, I see the same thing too in my presentations. And people ask me the same kinds of questions. Maybe we should pool our collective knowledge here and make it, one source instead of us, saying the same thing over and over again. So that way we can establish like, hey, here's the source of information so we can move on and progress and, help people and not just keep answering those same questions again and again and again. We have like a certain reference point to be like, hey, here's all this information you need to know, so that we can then, move on to the next step.
Being such a manga champion in your school, even if you wouldn't like self-proclaim yourself as a personal manga lover reader. Is that okay? Emily, does that accurately portray you? And then Julie, Mouna, I call myself a third person. Myself, Mouna, Sara, and Ashley, we all have like a creative written piece showing how we got into manga, which I really think librarians will connect with, because no matter how we can connect to it, that'll only benefit our students.
Well, and I do appreciate as a I don't even know what to call myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I haven't been indoctrinated. I haven't really ever gravitated towards this platform. I appreciate that I'm allowed, that Johnny come lately here, that I can be also included in this club of people who enjoy and appreciate. And for me, I love manga because my students love manga. It doesn't, for me, speak to my reading preferences. But because I support all of my students, I recognize that this is vitally important to creating an inclusive space, a representative collection, and my students will be better served if I embrace this as a vitally important part of our collection. So, and there's room for me in this conversation too. Yes. So, over the years, you've established yourselves as manga advocates for your respective schools. Would you mind sharing what is most compelling when you talk to your colleagues and your administrators who might question your commitments to build a manga collection in the library that you are supporting?
So this is Ashley. I would say it's non-negotiable. Manga gets kids reading. That's the simple answer. It's a multimodal format with diverse perspectives and complex visual literacy. Manga as a format has also a high capacity for building empathy. So I have right here, the listeners can't see it, but I have a book that I picked up in Japan. It's an interview with Morishita, the team behind A Sign of Affection, and their editor, and they discuss fairly in depth how their goal in writing shoujo manga is to depict how characters change. They use the word henka through interpersonal relationships. So manga is often about how characters are changing, growing. So there's a big SEL component to just even reading manga. And I think if you've read or seen A Sign of Affection, or even just know the context behind it, A Sign of Affection is about a relationship between a girl who is deaf and mostly signs, and a boy that she meets at college who is interested in many languages. And through meeting her, he becomes interested in sign language. You can kind of see how that plays into building empathy and care in young people just by the nature of the story.
Can I bring up real quick, just to sort of bounce off a bit what Ashley said? Should we define what shoujo manga is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
I'll say it real quick. Most manga is divided into demographics, and shoujo refers to manga that is primarily aimed toward teen girls and young women.
That makes sense. I mean, I know that there's traditional fiction that tends to skew towards more gender, sort of gendered audiences. And yet I like the idea that it does not exclude people from being part of that audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important thing to know. Like, the demographics are not a rule. So many feminine people read shonen manga. Many masculine people read shoujo manga, and there are other demographics in between, and you can read about them in the book. We explain them really in depth.
When they see the number of students reading manga during lunch in all of these places when they would normally see students on their phones, and instead they have a book in front of them, to me, like, that is the most powerful. I can't make an argument better than that. And then number two, the way that you can build connections, like students maybe that don't have super strong connections with teachers in their school, and then an administrator or counselor sees you like having these in-depth conversations with this student, and it's always usually centered around manga or anime. So for me, those are the two biggest ways to convince people in my school and stakeholders how important manga and anime are.
And forgive me, it seems to me like it would be very easy to pull up those circulation stats. I know several of you have clubs which allow students to get together and to talk about their shared interest in this format. Friends, I will acknowledge right now as the one person on the stage who is not a manga reader, but would like to do better by my students. I am so grateful when we have these expertise coming onto the show. So let me ask you, how have you all made these arguments for your administrators? Because I'm sure that how you spend your money is going to be called into question. For me, it's the circ stats, because when I look at and also, by the way, the frequency with which I see these students, because I might see a manga reader 2 times in the same day, which is hilarious because I will go for years without seeing many of my students who attend my school. But the manga readers are coming in when they have that, few minutes at the end of class, or they, before school, or right just as the bell is ringing. Oh, I just got to switch out this book. And it's so fantastic because that frequency of connecting with our students is what helps me know that I'm on the right path.
This is Emily. And I know that for my collection, when I started in the library, there was one copy of Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball number 4, and it was destroyed. It had been checked out like so many times. It was completely falling apart. And I was going to throw it away because it was just destroyed. I was like, this should have been weeded a long time ago. But a student who was helping me was just like emphatic, like, no, like, don't throw this away. He was so excited that he checked it out, and then he told his friend who came and checked it out, and he told his friend, and then he told her, and all these kids. And I had one. I was just like, I need more. I need more. These kids are so excited. I didn't have anybody else coming in to check out books like I had for that number 4 water warped, cover torn Dragon Ball number 4. This book that was so old. But they were so excited about it that it really just was like a moment where it's like, okay, this is something I really need to pay attention to. And so by the time I left my library 7.5 years later, I had like over 600 manga on the shelf. And I had made space for it. It had taken a long time, but that's those circulation numbers just showing, because you can pull the data just for them if you catalog them correctly, and just showing, hey, above all other titles, above Harry Potter, above your big readers, above everything else, manga is getting checked out. Like nothing else in my library. And that was enough to convince them that this was a worthwhile thing to do. So those circulation stats and making sure that you are paying
I will
attention
say,
to those and using those in your
I got to
advocacy,
spend
is
a
essential.
round of ESSER
And I
funds
still had
in
that Dragon Ball
September.
number 4 when I left.
And you want to become an instant hero with your students. Tell them, first of all, tell me all of the manga titles that you want. And I, in 6 days, spent $7,000 on manga, thanks to the recommendations that I pulled from the resources that specifically Ashley Hawkins put together, and Sara Smith and Ashley Hawkins, your blogs I will put full faith and confidence as a non-manga reader in the expertise on this panel today, because when they say this is something that'll fly off the shelf, this is something that you must have in a manga collection, and for me it was at the high school level, I spent that money with abandon and again obtained instant hero status. So friends, I'm not an avid manga reader, and I don't question that it should be in the building where I support this my library. But how will reading the book that you all wrote help me become a better librarian for my students and my school community? In other words, how is this book that you have written a resource for school librarians?
So this is Emily again. I'm also not an avid reader of manga. I love comics and I love graphic novels, but I'm not a big fan. My own personal children are. I have 4 kids and they all love manga. But it's hard for me, to be honest, it's hard for me to read. Somebody who came into it older, I tried reading it and I was like, you know what? My brain has a hard time with this. So don't feel bad. It's okay that you're not an avid manga reader, because that doesn't mean you can't be an amazing manga librarian. But I say that the book, what it does is it really helps you understand, well, like you said, why it's important. So even though you support it, there are a lot of people out there who are still like, manga? What's that? And like, okay, let's help you understand what manga is. And it's okay if you call it manga. I did too, in front of a big wig at Viz, and that was really embarrassing. Um, so we kind of go over like what it is, some of the terminology that we talked about, like shoujo and shonen, but also just some of the finer points of like cataloging and how to even put it on your shelf, how to promote it in different ways, how to get teacher buy-in, how to I don't just so many different things. And I think too, we kind of go over some of the mistakes that we've made and how to avoid those. One story that I do share, and I'll share here because I've shared it in presentations, is one of the big mistakes I made early on was I saw a box set. I was like, oh, a box set. There's 25 books in this box set, and I can get 2 of them. 50 books were like way cheaper than just buying them individually. And when I got them in, I was like, great. Oh darn. Oh darn. Now I have 50 books to put on the shelf. 50 books that are not going to get read. And I have to somehow figure out a space for them. And so, we kind of go over some of those things, like how to actually have manga on your shelves and promote it in a way that, doesn't start
This is
from
Ashley.
square
So
zero,
also,
from square
there's
one,
a lot of
where it
research in
starts
this
you
book.
off like,
I actually traveled to
best foot
Japan. I
forward.
visited libraries in Japan. I visited Tachikawa Manga Park, which is a complete manga library. It is just manga. And I visited a public library in Japan and brought some of those things back in. Not as much as I thought I was going to, because that's how research works. But also we did extensive research, and this is more than you would get from us from just our presentations or having a flyby conversation with us at ALA or AASL. It is like the bulk of this is the ultimate info dump of everything we can kind of pull together. And I got to really nerd out a bit in like the sections that I got to work on, and it was very invigorating to be able to finally like say all the things I ever wanted to say, but was always too nervous to like really go super nerdy. And that's really nice. And also just like I said, we brought a lot more to the table than you get from just the little interactions you get in little bits and pieces.
Well, and can I just say, as somebody who is coming at this from a zero prior knowledge, I am zero prior knowledge, I felt very comfortable with the content. I did not feel at all like I had sort of walked in on, a situation where I had to play catch up. You sort of did an excellent job of ushering those of us along who have not perhaps been immersed in this world, in this fandom, as you have. And it is very hard, because I think that when even librarians, when we're learning something new, it's very hard if we don't have any sort of foundation to ground ourselves. But I loved that as a librarian reading your book, I was very cognizant that this book was written for librarians and especially school librarians. And I'm going to shame myself right now because I have said out loud, it's, yes, I realize the book is written backwards. Please, just for our audience right now, explain in the most gentle way you can why we do not refer to these as books that you read backwards.
So this is Emily again. This is one big thing that I personally, I also had the same experience, and don't feel shame because we're very Western, and we were used to reading the way that we're used to reading. And like I said, for me, approaching it, especially as an older person who did not read this as a young person, Ashley and Sybil or Mouna and Sarah, they all read manga as young people, and so they had a lot more exposure to it. So, but for me, as an older person, I was like, oh, this book is backward. And I realized how important language is, right? Language matters, and what we say matters. And when we call things backward, it has a certain connotation to it. We say things are backward when we mean things are old or not good, right? When we say things are backward. So yeah, a lot of people are like, oh, this is backward. Like, no, this is flipped. This is in a different format. One of the things I really love about manga is that it exposes our students to a different culture and a different way of reading, helping them understand that the way we do things is not the right way. It's just different. And different cultures read in different ways. And they can experience different cultures, wherever they are by reading manga. And so to see students just embracing it and being excited about it and loving it, it's just like, hey, here's another culture that you get to be a part of. So yes, it's always an opportunity.
Well, and
when
even at the
students are
high
like,
school,
"Oh,
I
this is
watch my
backward."
students
No,
help
this
each
is
other.
flipped. This is
Like
what the
that's kind
author
of fun.
intended.
You've
want
got
you to read it
one
like they
who's
read it.
familiar bringing in their friend going, no, let me show you. Yes, Ashley.
So there's also something else I really want to point out about this. This is Ashley. About the whole backward thing is that we are now also seeing book censors use that as a reason to limit manga. It happened in Brevard County in Florida. That's another reason why we have to make sure that this misconception that it's backward and that it's not a way to read and that there's something wrong with it needs to be addressed. I actually got into a thing with a book vendor. So this past week, who told me, hey, you want me to process these books backwards because they're backwards books? And I was like, can you please Google me when you do these things? And it's just, there's so much misconception out there. And we have to address it. It's like very imperative because we saw recently there was a whole slew of manga that was banned in Tennessee. This is about more than just like, it's becoming about more than what it was before of just, oh, oops, people kind of don't totally understand. Now it's like, oh, we can use this as an excuse to just get rid of something that is foreign and something that is other and something that is widely appealing to LGBTQ plus people. And so that's also like why it's really important to make sure that we kind of cut that off at the knees.
When I read books, I'm very aware as an adult reading YA that I am not the intended audience. And I'm guessing that as somebody like you and I think we're both Gen X. Yes, we are both Gen X.
I'm smack dab in the middle of Gen X. 1972,
Dude,
baby.
And friends, I'm just going to go on the record. And Julie, you are not the oldest person in this conversation. I am the oldest person in this conversation. 1970. Thank you very much.
I'm the oldest from our team. I'll say
There
that.
you go. So there you go. You win the prize. But again, like these books were probably not written with Gen Xers in mind. So let me ask you, Julie, as somebody who's a Gen X, what is it that you feel transcends an age or a culture and still for you is an incredible read? I'd explain that to me.
This is Julie. In thinking about people who are just beginning to manga, this book is absolutely for them. But I do want to point out that it's also for people in the middle, or you already collect so much manga and you're ready for the next step. You're ready to include it in your curriculum or lesson plans or clubs. Or maybe you're even a manga expert. You're going to read about publishers from Ashley and Sara and Mouna that, a lot of information I didn't know. If Ashley is like the academic otaku, I'm like the non-academic otaku. Emily keeps saying how she's old. I think we can all agree I'm the oldest one here. And I did not read any manga until I was in my 40s. And it absolutely can be done. And I love it. It is what I want to read more than anything else. So this book, no matter where you are in your manga journey, I feel like this book has a lot for you.
But this is an important conversation for our listeners. Because, and forgive me, but when you sit on a panel with all these experts, and I just want to learn how to be better at what I'm doing. And I know that the expertise that I drew upon when I was spending that money, that wonderful, marvelous week in September before the money dried up, I could trust the expertise because specifically with Ashley and Sarah's resources that they have so generously shared on their blogs. And these must purchase lists, but and my students think I'm a hero, and I had nothing to do. All I did was say, you know what, this is vitally important. We're going to make sure that we spend our money this way. But I still recognize that it happens because there has to be this intentionality. I don't think librarians create a manga collection accidentally. I think that there is a great deal of intentionality that goes into this.
Great question. And I think part of that is something I've learned from Ashley, right? In Japan, manga is not something just for teens. I mean, it's all ages, right? You're reading books for all ages. And I think that's one of the reasons why our young people love manga so much, because someone who has watched a lot of animated shows when they're younger, they're interested in more adult, mature stories. And they can find those in Japanese media that they can't find as much in Western media. I mean, that's changing. I mean, Arcane, can we all agree that how amazing Arcane is, as a side note?
Ashley, you mentioned that there were some books that had gotten the attention of some book banners in the community. But let me ask you, is there concerns, do they have a reason to be concerned about the content in these books?
I mean, Sasaki and Miyano, which is the book that was banned in Brevard County, is about an LGBTQ plus relationship, but it is the most wholesome, adorable, and also there's no but there. It just is about it's about two boys who fall in love, and all they do is cutely talk about what they love about manga. That's it. That's the content. That's all that's there. And in Tennessee, there's similar titles that kind of got lumped in similarly, such as Bloom Into You, which is just two girls falling in love, having nothing but very normal high school love, the same as you would find in any shoujo manga, is in that title. But what the school board member did was they used the fact that the format was not what she was familiar with to say, listen, I don't think this book should even be here because we teach kids to read from left to right, which was what she said. She was able to use confusion to further her agenda. So she was able to use it because the content of the book really didn't justify the action that they chose to take.
I don't know. I like the title. Ashley is talking about Sasaki and Miyano that got banned in Brevard is the most wholesome manga in the world. So I don't know.
Well, and I think that it's very possible that because there is this graphic, it's because it's a visual, format. It is oftentimes perhaps a little bit faster for them to flip through and to identify content that, absent of reading the content, because they're not reading what is being explained. They're simply looking at the visuals and drawing their objections based on that. Yes, Emily.
So to go back to your question, because absolutely the arguments are ridiculous in what they're trying to do. However, librarians, and this is something the book addresses, should be aware that there is content in manga that is at different levels. We authors or publishers publish age ratings on the back of manga for a reason. And there are titles that I would have in high school. One of my most popular titles was Tokyo Ghoul, which is extremely violent, but hugely popular with my high school students. I would not put that in a middle school or an elementary school library because it's not appropriate for an elementary student to read. So yes, librarians should be aware that, of course, there's always going to be content that is applicable and appropriate for our different levels, but that's up to librarian ability to decide, right? Like we all have the ability to decide what's most appropriate for our content areas.
Yes.
Just
So in regards
be
to
aware that there
age
are, and
ratings,
one of the things we do in the book is we have
personally, I
recommendations
find
for
when it
different
comes to
levels.
manga, personally, I find it really easy to separate it out in the way of age recommendations. Because when you look at the age ratings on the back of most English published manga, it's not only by like teen, adult, young kids, it's more like all ages, youth, which tends to be 10 plus, teen 13 plus, older teen 16 plus, and then mature 18 plus. So they cut it down. And so say if something is 16 plus, like Emily said, you wouldn't put that in, say, a middle school library.
My middle school, which is another great thing because manga is so fast to read. I think we've probably all made mistakes on getting something. I will share mine. I actually don't know if I told my team this one. I was like, oh, this is great in a middle school library. And I ordered Food Wars. I was like, it's a cooking show. It's like adorable. And I read the first volume and I was like, oh, okay. So I donated it to a public library. It is not a good age fit for middle school at all. I think sometimes people see kind of like the youthful appearance of characters on a manga cover and don't realize, but they can look at the back of the cover, like Moon and Emily have said, and then they can read reviews that a lot of us on this call write. So I will say I use the age ratings, but I also I use my own judgment because sometimes I read something and I think this is totally fine for middle school.
Well, and this is where, my familiarity with Ashley's blog and with Sarah's blog, I absolutely tabbed them when I was spending that money because I cross-checked all of my purchases with the sort of the recommendations and the reviews of school librarians, because you get people who are school librarians like myself, and I put full faith in the professional recommendations of school librarians when they review content, knowing full well that other educators and librarians are looking to them for recommendations that we can spend our money on sight unseen. Yes, Sarah.
Yeah, so we've you and I, Amy, have gone into this extensively on the other episodes, but this comes down to like with other sections of your library, looking at also what your community standards are, because so we just actually went through a training with a lawyer from Fire, and he's the First Amendment rights lawyer, and obscenity charges unfortunately come down to what is held to what the community thinks is obscene. And so even if we think that it's fine as librarians and we've gone through our training, then some of these First Amendment rights laws that are going through, and like in Oklahoma and everything, and librarians are going to get into hot water or litigation based off of what books are in their libraries. It still comes down to what does your community uphold, and what do they believe. So you still need to know what is going to be acceptable in your area. So, age ratings are good, reviews are good, but I could say that my community is fine with having something that's really violent in a lower age group, right? Like if it's just blood and guts and people getting beheaded, that's fine for middle school. Nobody's going to bat an eye. But somewhere else, like in another community in another state, if that's not okay, don't put that in your middle school. So you still need to know your area very well when you're looking at reviews.
So, friends, there are listeners who are tuning in and they're wondering, are there parts of this book specifically which support elementary and middle school librarians? Because for me as a high school librarian, I thought I was like, hey, I'm good. So much of when it comes to issues of content, I can breathe easy, and I've got some of my students are already adults. They are already well on their way to 19 years old. But let me ask you, as somebody who has also taught elementary, what in your book is going to help me if I am an elementary librarian or a middle school librarian? All right. Yes, let's go ahead. Ashley?
So, this is Ashley. A couple of years ago, I moved down to elementary school because elementary librarians told me they were struggling. And I sort of went, well, let's get messy. Let's do the work. And it is hard to build a manga collection for that level, for elementary. There isn't very much available here in the West. But I wrote the section for elementary librarians because I got in there and I got messy. I went and I did the work. I had to learn super fast to do the work. And Amy, I owe so much to you and your podcast because I listened to those episodes like 3 times, especially because I teach 3K and I listen to those episodes like over and over again. But I learned a lot. And I wrote every elementary lesson. I've taught the lessons or versions of those lessons, and I've been successful. But I will say in the earlier version of the book, I talked about how I wished certain edgy manga was available in translation. Edgy manga is educational manga. And now one of them is actually picked up by Udon Entertainment. There's a biography about Charles Schultz now available for kids. And things are slowly shifting. Maybe someday my dream of us getting Oshiri Tente, which translates to the butt detective, localized will happen. But I'm telling you, Oshiri Tente comes over, everybody will be saying Captain Underpants and Dogman Who. But until then, I think there's definitely stuff in there because I've done the work and I'm not the only one who's done that level of work.
Yes, Sarah.
Okay, so what I love, so I don't love that books take a long time to write, as anyone who's written a book probably knows that. But what I love is that as we started this, all of us were in a different role than we are when we ended the book. And so we, I think we're able to bring shifting perspectives and different things into the book. So we started with a bunch of high school librarians and a middle school librarian and a person who was in school. And now we are all over the board in terms of what perspectives we have, and it shows. So we were able to, to bring or to edit the book and bring in new things as we were going through different drafts, and bring in new lesson plans, new different ideas. And so yeah, there's something in here for like literally everybody because we're everywhere now.
Well, and you mentioned lesson plans, and I think that it's I'm not the only one who, when you see lesson plans that grow out of a manga collection, this is really, for some educators and administrators, this is what validates that spending of money. Unfortunately, unless you can assign, a value to your collection, unless you say, it's independent reading. Well, all of a sudden, if you say, actually, we have lessons that are attached to many of these concepts that we're trying to build in our students, or these characteristics that we're hoping to build in our students, I love that when people read your book, they are going to get to have some ways to apply the concepts which you are then teaching into a classroom setting.
Sure. I'm a high school librarian now, but I cut my teeth as a baby librarian, as a middle school librarian for 8 years. And in fact, the library I'm now is shared. So I have middle school students that I'm doing readers advisory for a lot. So middle school is like in my heart forever as far as manga goes. Middle school librarians out there listening, the difference between 6th grade and 8th grade feels like 10 years. And the number of your students who will come to you and say, but I've already watched this, or so, insert family figure here, lets me watch it or lets me read it. And the book talks about how to respond to those, and collecting middle school manga that's edgy enough to appeal to your middle school students, but is still a good age fit. So it absolutely, Ashley mentioned lesson plans. We have elementary and middle school lesson plans. We have elementary and middle school collection development, and elementary and middle school examples throughout the book, which I'm really proud of.
Well, and I think, when you look at something that you have put together that has evolved over the years, you do take stock of where you placed that kind of, where did you have the biggest impact on this collaboration? And I love that, for each of you, there are different parts of this book which really do speak to you. And, I really want to hear, especially, when we look at that, books are always going to be windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors for us as readers, whether we're students or the teachers or the school librarians. And I hadn't realized just how true this is when it comes to manga, which can connect with our most marginalized students.
This is Julie. Lesson plans, for every educator out there knows, like when we're writing them for someone else, it's like the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. I literally did a Cells at Work, which is this amazing science-based manga, which like anthropomorphizes parts of the body. The main characters are like this adorable kind of, femme-presenting red blood cell that's like a mail carrier, and then a white blood cell, very mask-looking, that's like a SWAT team member. I did it in 7th grade science. It's actually a whole unit. I did it for a month. And then I sat down on the computer, like to write the formal lesson plan for the book. And I texted Ashley and I was like, what is a cell? Like I like trying to write it. So this is just to say the amount of time and care we put in the 12 lesson plans that are in the book. There's 4 based for ELA. There's 4 for other subjects, including history and art. And then there's 4 anime club lessons. And they go from elementary to high. They include one that's like an introduction to manga, so you could do it with different levels. I'm really, really proud of this part of the book. So much of like our like sweat and tears are in those 12 lesson plans. So thank you for highlighting those.
So this is Ashley. This is where this gets personal for me. I was that kid. And you'll see that in my story in the book. I got really personal in my story in the book. I was that kid, and I've worked with those kids. And that's what's really important to me, is also to represent the kids that I've worked with, and to make sure that their voices are in this book. And kids' voices are in this book. Julie's students' voices are in this book. And those communities are really important, not just within our library spaces, but also as representations of the anime and manga community as a whole, and making sure that they have their own time, their own space, is really, really important, especially right now in this current moment that we're in. When the library, which I think is the best place ever, is the space for those communities, which for me were the place where I could be validated as the queer neurodivergent kid. It just feels like so natural and so right, and just seeing kids flourish in those spaces is super, super important.
Yes. So, in regards to marginalized readers, so I have a couple of notes related to first neurodivergent readers, then queer readers, and Black readers, and other readers of color. Um, so I myself have autism and ADHD. And over the years, I realized that what's considered kind of the classic weird kid weeb behavior, especially like in the early 2000s, those were all like inherently linked to common neurodivergent behavior. Things like the info dumping, reciting your favorite facts and quotes, collecting. And did I mention the info dumping? Of course, the info dumping. Like what Ashley says, I too was that kid. In addition, anime and manga art is very expressive. The facial expressions are really clear, and I know there are a lot of neurodivergent readers who may have trouble with facial expressions in real life, and may find manga appealing in that sense. As for queer readers, so anime and manga fandom is very queer. You can almost say the Venn diagram is a near circle. Part of the reasoning for this is very frequent depictions of gender nonconformity, such as the certain archetypes. Archetypes such as the Bishonen character, Bishonen meaning beautiful boy. So male characters who kind of blur the lines of male beauty standards with more delicate features. There are cross-dressing characters, a lot of sort of gender bendy kind of series. One well-known series from the 80s, but actually has a currently running reboot called Ranma One Half, about a boy who sometimes becomes a girl because of a curse. There's also an archetype known as the girl prince. So a female character who has a very princely way about her. One example being Sailor Uranus from Sailor Moon.
I do, but
and I forget the character's name.
give us 1 second,
but
because I know exactly who she's
Monthly
talking
Girls
about, but I
Nozaki-kun.
can't remember her name.
Ashley, do you know who I mean?
Kashima. I just looked it up. Oh my God.
But I have to imagine, when you consider that the artistry that goes into these books and the inclusivity and allowing our students to see characters and see themselves in this representation, it's got to be incredibly validating to our students. And especially when you realize that it is done in a way that is accepting and celebrates our students. And how could you not make this kind of investment in our collection when you realize the students who need the companionship of this format, and then to see the visual expression of so much of what they identify with. I think that it's all well and good. I've got a great relationship collection in my fiction, and it is. But in order to enjoy my relationship collection, you have to be reading books that are 200, 275 pages, 300 pages long. And for some of our students who would like to see themselves in the pages of a book, that is a real high bar. But if you provide a visual and break it down into a manga format, which has fewer words per page, has still high expectation in terms of reading content, but not in terms of the volume of writing. I guess I'm not really putting this right into words, but because you have that visual component, it is far more likely to include some of our readers who would find reading a 300-page book a little daunting. Yeah, Julie.
As to add on to what you said and what Mouna and Ashley said, collecting manga in our schools is an equity issue. It underpins everything else we do, everything else we're talking about in this conversation. When we think about our queer students, our neurodivergent students, and our Black, Indigenous students of color, and all of the amazing intersectionalities therein, if we know that no community is a monolith, but if we know that there is increased interest among these amazing communities in our schools for manga, and we are not collecting manga, to me, that's like educational malpractice. Like, as librarians, we have to support manga so completely to support our students completely.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So, friends, you have spent years committed to this common cause of generating this amazing resource, which is now out and available. And I'm so excited. We can finally hold the book and celebrate and turn the pages and see the dedication that you have poured into this shared work product. I love when librarians team up, because you're doing this to support the larger profession and ultimately the students that and our school communities. So let me ask you, you're celebrating, the book is out. Before we say goodbye, please let us know, what is something that you are especially proud of when it comes to this wonderful book that you have all written together?
Mouna, you should go and say what you put in the chat about Black readers and fandom.
Whenever you're ready. You can take your turn. I just want you to be able to say, again, going back to this idea, what are you really excited about when it comes to other people reading your work?
Oh, yes. So we go into this a little bit in the book, but something I really wanted to bring up about Black manga readership. So, as someone who's been reading manga ever since I was a kid, and a Black person, this is an audio medium, just so you know. I'm Black. So years ago there was a misconception that Black kids just weren't into this, but that just simply was not true. It's never really been true, especially now though. Manga is so popular among readers of color, and there's starting to be more Black public figures who are openly into anime and manga. Two big examples being Michael B. Jordan, who put out a fashion line inspired by Naruto, and the rapper Megan Thee Stallion, who is a huge fan of Jujutsu Kaisen and collaborated with some of the voice actors on a song. Another factor is a term that a lot of fans, whether experienced or not, don't seem to know. This term is mukokuseki, which means stateless or without nation. This refers to the tendency for manga characters to not have a lot of racially defining features. There are a lot of people who are the uninitiated who will look at anime and manga characters and say, why do they not look Asian? Or why do they look white? But it all kind of rolls back to that term. You can also apply that term to The Simpsons, interestingly enough, because they're yellow. No one looks like that. And I bring that up to say in the sense of, in the context of Black manga readers, a term that really started to go around, especially in 2020, was the term race bending. So this is the act of redesigning a character to reflect one's own racial features, usually through fan art or cosplay. And due to the mukokuseki factor, many Black manga readers have through fan art, created Black designs of anime characters or drew themselves in the universe of of their favorite stories. And the reason this especially started to blow up recently was in 2020, so the height of the Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations. Many Black artists participated in the online hashtag event called Blacktober, so portmanteau of Black and October. This celebrated Black race fan art and as well as original characters from manga-inspired artists who are of the Black community. And this was serving as a way for Black anime and manga fans to find community and celebrate themselves during this really tumultuous and uncertain time.
Fantastic. Let me ask you, anybody else want to share before we sign out? Yes, Sarah.
So I think it was a labor of love for sure, but I think my favorite part of the book now is the collection development section. We went through the most revisions of it, and it went from probably like 30 pages down to 15. But Ashley and I and Emily went back and forth through many sections and had to take out chunks of it because it was way too long. It was painful, but what's come out of it is really important, and I think it's gonna be really helpful for librarians that have it. But I'm looking forward to if people who buy this, I think, are really going to have some amazing tips for getting just developing their manga sections in their libraries. And this is, like we said before, but this is all of our tips and tricks and everything that we've learned poured into this book. And this is a great group of people that we've worked with together over the last 2 years now. I think we started this in 2022 of January. That's when we first started drafting things. So it's almost 2 years.
Let me hear, Julie.
Sure. I always want to say something. In addition to everything else that's been mentioned that we love about the book, we haven't mentioned the art. So Mouna, as our resident author artist, illustrated both hers and Sarah's personal stories, which are at the end of the book. And then 2 students at my school, Leah illustrated Ashley's story and Alex illustrated my story. And so to have student voices throughout the book plus student art feels really special.
Aw, amazing. What is it about this book that makes you really excited, Emily?
So I'm very excited about the destigmatizing, I think, of manga that I hope a lot of people get from this. I think manga has a kind of a bad rap, or people are they just don't know. And there's still so many people who just don't know anything about manga. And I very much come from that same perspective where I just didn't really know a whole lot about manga. And I really went through a lot of self-education to get to this point. And so it's I really hope that people pick this book up because they, like you, they want to just be better and they want to be able to help their students. And hopefully they can learn from my experience and the experience of all of the librarians here because we all have just very different perspectives. So I really am just hoping that a lot of people get the idea that you don't have to be a huge fan of manga. You don't have to be a reader. You don't have to have read any manga to put manga in your school libraries and reach out to those students. So that's what I'm really hoping people get from the book.
Absolutely. All right. Yes, Ashley.
And I think I'm just excited for people to finally have this information in their hands. It took a lot to put it all together and to bring it all together. And it's so exciting to really have now I'm showing off because I'm the first one to get a physical copy of the book. I have this physical thing that I can go, here, this is the thing. This is what will explain all the things. I am in the work of educating future librarians. And so for me, knowing that now we have something that we can share with librarians that is just, okay, here's how you go out there. Here's how you do the work. Here's what makes it easy for you. The fact that we have lesson plans is a big help to people who are just entering the profession, because often what my students tell me is they struggle with building lesson plans. And just, I love being a resource for people because there's so many people in this community who are a resource to me. And so sharing is super important to me.
Okay. Friends, let me ask, would you be so kind? We are going to fill our show notes with your social media. And so I'm going to encourage, rather than us read that all off together, I'm going to encourage friends, listeners, do make sure to check out today's show notes for ways to reach out and contact each of these amazingly talented and generous authors. Friends, thank you so much for helping me celebrate this very last episode of 2024. Thank you so much for this amazing book. And I wish you a very happy 2025, you published authors. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for helping us promote the book, Amy.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Be sure to visit Learnics at learnics.com to learn more and schedule a demo. If you mention that you heard about Learnics on School Librarians United, you will receive a 20% off your subscription. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. I want to thank everyone for a very successful 2024. I appreciate the support of my sponsors over the years, the incredibly generous team of guests who have graced the airwaves each week. Today marks the 46th episode of 2024, and that would not have been possible were it not for the many school librarians who shared their time and talent in recording our conversations. And finally, to the very best listening community and amazingly supportive PLN. I am so grateful for your friendship. You can be sure 2025 will be filled with the episodes all showcasing school librarians and the phenomenal work we do every day. I wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year filled with good health and happiness.